All right, welcome back. We are WEBD6201 in the winter 2022 semester at Durham, and it's week 12, part 2 of our broadcast and recording. So, where last we left off, we talked about where we are. We're sitting at authentication with Mongo, Express, and Passport. So that's what we've been doing this week. Just a reminder that next week is we have Good Friday on Friday, so there's no school, as well as I'll be teaching remotely again on Friday of the following week. Okay, so then a couple Fridays left, and that's pretty much it. This is kind of like the third last week of semester. So what else? This week, just as a reminder, ICE 12 is due Saturday. I've adjusted all that and put the lab report up so you can see that there. Test 4 is also due on Saturday. Let's see why that is. And sorry, I've got some notes here that the meeting is locked, and that's not ever my intention. That was not something that I wanted. Let's unlock that meeting. All right. And there we go. All right. And there we go. So welcome, Cameron and Keegan. So there you go. So yeah, so we're talking about test 4 is due Saturday. So if you haven't had a chance to do test 4, then please get that started. You get 2 attempts, and then again, you get the highest attempt. Lab 4 again is due week 14, and that kind of stuff. And then stuff we covered last day was what is Passport? How do we? What kind of modules we need? We were restructuring our application. We're going to do more of that today, and we have some things to do today to make sure that everything works. We configured our application. And that's the first thing we did when we met on Wednesday, and today we're going to use that configuration to basically do the 3 functions that we want, which is register, log in, and log out. Those are the 3 things we want to accomplish today. Okay, so that is what's happening this week. Without further ado, let's get into it and go right into Visual Studio Code. All right, so last day, and I'll wait for you guys to catch up as well. Thank you guys for joining me remotely today. So last day, what we talked about was a bit of restructuring, and I'm going to do that now. I did it for the other classes, and I want to do it for you guys too. So first thing is we need to make a brand new folder called server. And inside of our server folder, what we want to do is we want to drop in all of the server related folders. So for this, before we start, what I want to do is I want to do a Control-Shift-B, and I want to transpile because it's going to help us with creating that relationship, the relationship between our server and our route and everything else. We do still have some issues to take care of, which we will today. Okay, at the same time, what I also want to do is run our local server. So I'm going to just run a command prompt and just run in Mongodb, which will allow us to test locally. So I'm doing that. So I'm setting all that up right now. And then the next step after that is let's run nodemon. I'm just going to choose one of these PowerShells here and just do a nodemon so we know that everything is working with the things that we have in place at this time. So Mongo at localhost up online. What we want to do is we want to test everything. There we go. There's localhost 3000. We can see that that's working. The biggest problem right now is, sure, we can see everything, but we don't want to. Okay, so that's where we are right now. Awesome. All right, so that's where we're starting off with. What we want to do here, so make sure there's nothing else going on. What we want to do here is we want to refactor some of these things, and we have a few errors that are coming up and that we're going to fix in a second. Sometimes what ends up happening is when we do this, when we first start off, it kind of recognized a couple errors, and we're going to fix these errors now. We're going to talk about how to fix them and what to do. Our routes also, same thing. There's a bit of an error there, but before we move on, Before we fix anything, the best thing for us to do is restructure our files and folders to go into the model, into the server folder before we start. Okay, let's do that first. So again, I'm just going to drag and drop. I'm going to take my views folder and drag it into the server folder. And by the way, if you're running, if you do that and you're running NodeMon, let's just stop NodeMon just for a second while this happens, because otherwise NodeMon locks the views from happening. So I did that. Routes into server. I'm also going to take models, put that into server without killing everything. Models into server, right? And config into server. So those are all the things that I've done. So I've reconfigured everything. So there's a server folder and a client folder. Let's fix the stuff that's inside of here now because it's all red. First, let's check out our server.ts. Our server.ts should say /server config app, because now it's looking inside of the server folder, inside of config, and going into my app folder. Cool. My app folder has to be restructured. Sorry? Then you have to change it. Then you should change it. You should change this so it matches this. This is the new route for, that should be in your server.ts, like this. Okay. Then what you want to do is in your app.ts, you know that views are going to be okay, because if you go up one level and down into views, it's the same because we've made everything relative. However, client and node modules need to be changed. So you're going to go up 2 this time. So up 1, up a second one into client, and then up 1, up a second one into node modules. So those have to be changed as well. That's on line 51 and 52. Okay. What about models? So models has a user.ts model, and it looks like passport local schema and all that kind of stuff is not computing. Why? It looks like we've taken away our passport local mongoose. We're going to put it back in a second. And that's why we have these issues right here. Let's put all that stuff back, and I'll tell you how to fix that problem we had last day. So going back into a PowerShell, what I want to do is I want to add in, to fix all these red things, which we don't like to look at, I want to add in yarn add at types passport local mongoose. Please add that in. -- dev, of course, because it's going to go to the dev dependencies of our package. And what that's going to do is if I go into our package.json, you can see that that is indeed there again. And I'm going to show you how to fix our problem. We only have one error now when we did that. And it's right here inside of our user, serialized user. A quick and dirty way to fix this, I'm just going to tell you this, is I want you to right-click on serialized user and go to definition. And what this is going to do is going to take you into the bowels of the type definition library for passport. And what I want you to do is where it says serialized user, there's 2 overloads for the function. And where it says user is express user, just change this piece right here to any. And that should fix and silence the error. If you save that, then notice that there are no longer any errors inside of our code. There's an error inside of it. Yeah, no problem. So what you do is you go into the error area where, for example, on line 72 approximately of your app.ts, you're going to right-click on serialized user and go to definition at the top, or press F12. You see that? I clicked on the wrong serialized user. No problem. Serialized user, this one. Passport serialized user. When you do that, it takes you into serialized user over here in the passport type definition file, and you're just going to change the user type from express user to any. And this should just silence the errors for now. All right, so that's what that does. And now let's make sure everything is saved. So save all, make sure all that's saved. And when we do that, let's run NodeMon again. So go back to where we stopped NodeMon, and I think that was the first one. There it is. And I'm just going to run NodeMon again. It should still work just like before. So I've restructured. I have my server now, and everything is inside of my server. The only thing that's read is node modules, and that's only because our type definition files are somewhat clashing, but don't worry about it right now. It's not going to affect us in any way. So what we want to do is, remember, this is just a dev dependency anyway. I want to do is go back out to our file, and let's make sure that we can still navigate all these, and there's no issues. If there's an issue here, this is where you want to, stop and fix it. Okay, so no issues. And going back to this, we can see that we're good. I'm going to put this up on GitHub. So that's our first line of business. I
lost my CSS somewhere.
Okay, I'll fix you in a second. We're going to say restructured project with server folder. All right, so if you're having a problem with your CSS, remember one of the things that we had to do is go into your server, into your views, and into your index.ejs. Make sure that your index.ejs has, it looks like this. All the slashes have to be here. So slash, 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 slash. If you don't have this.
I do.
You do have all this?
Yeah.
Okay. And also make sure that inside of your server config app.ts that both your client and node modules look like this and your views look like this. That has to happen. The rest should be pretty much the same. Because this is where it comes from. This is the error that you might get.
Okay, I missed the extra dot slash on those two lines.
There you go.
Okay, thanks.
That kind of gives you up, puts you up 2 levels, if you will. All right, so now that we have this, we're always going to start with EJS changes because we have some stuff to change on the EJS side. So why is that? Because what we want to try and do always is fix up our views first before we do any changes. So I'm going to start with our content, and I'm going to go into my login view. We need to change this a little bit. And where we need to change this is we need to add a message area that's compatible with EJS. So far, we have a message area, but the problem is it depends on front-end technologies. We want to change that. So the way to do that is, let's just make a note. This is our message area again. And what we want to do is we want to say if, because EJS can do if statements, if messages, we don't have a messages object, but we're going to add it in, messages.length, if that's greater than 0, then, and we're not going to close off the curly brace, then we're going to go to the next place here and then close it off. So again, this is just EJS syntax, right? Inside the message area itself, what this means is we're not even going to have a message area if messages length is less than 1. That's what it means. If I have no messages, don't even include a message area at all. But when we do have message length greater than 0, then what I want to do is I want to inject whatever is in the messages object. Okay, that's the new way of doing it for our for the backend. Now we have to remember that we cannot ever go to login as an example without modifying the route so it includes a messages object. Right now it does not. So it's gonna crap out on us. Next, form. We have to define the method for the form as post, capital P, O-S-T. All right, so that's the next part. Because what we want to do with the method is when I go to my login form, I want to click the login button, and it's going to create a post request with the server. Okay, so that's why it has to be post. Further than that, we have to go down to where we have our login and cancel buttons, and we may have to make some changes here as well. So one is our login button is a type button. This has to change to a type submit. And our cancel button has to change to a type of cancel. Okay, and that is really all we have to do with our login form. Login form is done. Okay, are you with me with the login form? Check mark if you're with me, X if you're not. Yay, awesome, thank you. All right, next, now that we've got our login form, let's do the harder one, which is the register form. The register form needs a little bit more love, and let me talk about why it does. Well, we didn't really work on the register form together too much this semester. We've been working with logging in, but you guys had to work on the register form yourself for your lab. Here underneath the H1 tag where it says register, I want to just copy paste this stuff that we had from our login form, the message area. I want to go back to my login form and copy the message area stuff because we're going to have the same message area inside of our register form now. This part right here. Why? Because I'm going to have these server-side messages that I'm going to inject into the forms when I press the submit button. Normally what would happen is, of course, it would refresh and I would lose all the messages. But what I'm doing is I'm actually going to hold the messages that I want on the server side in a key value pair format using connect flash. We're going to talk about that in a bit. And then when there's an error, I'm going to inject this stuff inside of the message area. One thing I forgot for the message area is we need to add a class, sorry about this, which is of type alert and alert-danger. We should color this so that it's the same on both message areas. Just copy paste, please. I forgot to do that. Up here as well. Because this will make that red bar that comes up, that basically will show that there's an error. All right, cool. So now that I have the message area done, again in the form, we should make it so that the method is post, because we're going to submit the form. Now, there is a problem with the form. The problem that I have is, well, there's a couple. One, if you notice on line 19 here for me, the first name field, the ID is capital F, and that's kind of an error. Let's put that, make it lowercase. We probably don't need it, but I just want to be consistent. And the other thing is, if you notice, you're going to kind of pull it in together here. If you notice this, that, well, there is no username field, and that can't be. We need to have a username field when we register. So let's add some stuff to the form to make it a little bit more usable. So we want to separate our personal information from our system identification. And in order for me to do that, I'm going to add another little paragraph in here with a class of lead. Inside that, I'm going to have an I tag with a class of FAS FA-user shield, a little shield with a user icon. And then this is going to be something like personal, let's make a space here, personal information. Okay, that's where that's going to go. Okay. So then I'm going to go do this part, my first name and last name. I have my email address. Those are very important pieces. And now when I come down to my password, I need to duplicate this. Let's just get rid of the extra spaces when we don't need them, please. And just duplicate this password field. So we have two of those now. And what I want to do is underneath or where it says div class form group, I'm going to put an MT, which is margin top 4, which is going to separate the personal information up here from the system identification information down here. Between the row, I'm going to do the same thing I did up there. I'm going to say paragraph with a class of lead. And inside of that, I want an I tag with a class of FAS FA-database. So a little database is going to be the icon, and almost like a system database, if you will. And I'm going to put in system identification. That's what that is going to be, that section. Okay. We're going to change the type here from password to text, and it's going to be from password to username. Please make sure you spelled username correctly, because this is a key thing for registering. If you don't have this spelled correctly, you will not be able to register. And this also changed the placeholder text that's going to appear inside the field to username with a capital U. Okay, so username and password. Okay, so that is your system identification area, right? We added another field. We also did some separation here with personal information and system identification just to make it look a little nicer. And if I scroll down, we have to make some changes again to our buttons, right? Which are down here. So instead of text right, it's going to be text end. That's the new version for Bootstrap 5. Submit button is correct. And we need a register, icon. And the register icon is going to be an iTag with a class of FAS, and I think it's FA dash user dash plus, I think. Yes. And that is going to be a little user with a plus sign next to it. So we're adding a user. That's your register button, and that's a submit type. Let's steal the cancel button from the login page. So login page, I'm going to scroll all the way down, grab that cancel button right here, and put it in underneath the submit button here. And I also want to, just so you can see everything, I'm just going to put this over 2 lines as well, like this. Okay, and that finally is my, well, actually, let's also put a little margin top too. That finally is my my register page. You can't see them right now because, well, those pages are not available because of there is no messages object, right? There's no messages object. So if I try and go there now, let's try and go there. And if I go to login, it's going to give me this. It's going to crap out and give me this. And it says messages is not defined. We need to change this in the router. We're going to fix this in a second. All right, so the last page I want to change before we fix that problem is I want to go to components and go to header.ejs. So here we have another problem. When we log in, we want to show that we're logged in. There's a login and log out. Right now, there's only ever a login, and the front end was taking care of our switching. We're not going to use the front end like that anymore. So what I want to do is change the component so that the header has a conditional statement. And we can do that by doing something like looks like this. We can say, hey, if we have display name, if display name exists, right, then what we want is to output something else we want to do something else. Okay, and obviously this is incorrect. We want to copy paste this part inside of here, and we're going to say that, okay, cool, this is okay. And by the way, we could do this very differently if we want to, but I want to show you this so you can see that this is a conditional injection. So it's either going to do this tag or this anchor tag with this ID or this anchor tag as an example. So how do I do that? Well, it can look like this. I can say if my display name is there, that means I'm logged in. So this should show logout, right? And it'll be FA sign out alt instead of sign in alt. Okay. The root will be different. It'll be logout. That'll be the new root, right? And this will say logout as well. Okay, just in case we want to hook into it with JavaScript on the front end.
Just a quick thing. Your else statement doesn't have it's not a closing. Thank you.
Thank you. It would have crapped out. It would have told me. But that's fine. Thank you for that. It's better to do it and be faster than make a mistake like I just did. All right, so that's good. So that is the swapping out login with logout. We're going to do more of this next week, where we do more conditionals with EJS. This is the power of using a templating engine anyway. All right, nice. So we have our display name, and this will work because we've been injecting display name for day 1. But right now, display name is empty, and we're going to have to make a way of injecting the display name inside the route. Okay. Right now, we don't have that mechanism. Okay, cool. We've made those changes. Let's go back up here, and we're going to say git add dot git commit -m, and we're going to say updated login, register, and header EJS files. Okay. And we need to do that again to support authentication so it works well with us. Next one, after we do this, what we want is, once we've done that, we can close this off, and this off. We don't care about those. App.ts is pretty good. We have nothing to do there. Our server.ts, we have nothing to do there, but we do have some stuff to do here. And this is our route index, or index route. That's what it is. So I want to just separate these a little bit. So at the top, this is our kind of our main, these are our main or top level routes. That's what these are, right? This is where you can go to our register page, sorry, our about products, services, and so on. That's what this does. Okay. So there's another section that we're going to have, which we're going to move out of here eventually, which is our authentication routes. That's what this is. These are our authentication routes. Okay. And yet another section down in here, which is our temporary routes, where it says temporary contact list. This is our contact list routes. I'm doing this so that it's easier for us to peg where we want to look. Okay. So it's like, this is a region, this is a region, there's a bunch of regions here that we can look at. Okay. So nice. And by the way, if we wanted to, we could fold all this up too, but let's go back in here and take a look. So here we have our two routes. And notice that the reason why we can't see this, if I go back out here, this is doing this, is because we have no messages object here. We have a title object, a page object, a display object, display name, but we don't have a message object. Let's add that in. So we're saying messages, and we'll just, for now, we'll put in a placeholder. Okay, that's a place. So is this. This is a placeholder, and so is this. Let's put that messages placeholder in here as well. Okay, and if I was to save this, and go back out to here and refresh, now we're seeing our login, page again. And if I click register, we can take a look at what the new register page looks like. So a little nicer. So we have first name, last name, email. That's your personal information. We could have collected more if we wanted to, an image, whatever. And then system identification, username, password, and confirm password. We're not confirming anything here at all right now. Okay. All right, so that is this. Now, question for you is, do we ever want to see login or register pages if I'm already logged in? What do you think? Should I even see those pages if I'm logged in? Ever?
No.
No. Right? That doesn't make sense, because if I'm logged in and I try and log in again, that could potentially cause issues. So in order for me to avoid this problem, what I want to do is I want to put a little guard in place for it to stop that from happening. So I can do that like this. In my login page, which is my display login page, I can say if I don't have a request.user, if that doesn't exist, right? Then and only then do I want to render that page. And I want to use a return statement for this. Now the return, it doesn't really do anything, because, not necessarily, because right now, if you look at render doesn't return anything, it returns void. But what it's doing is it'll skip out of this function. It'll stop this function and then go to display this thing, and it won't go to the next line. The next line actually is going to be another return statement. We say return res.redirect, and we want to redirect back to the contact list page, because we are assuming that if you have a user, you're logged in. Now we could change this if we wanted to be more specific. We have roles and all that stuff, but we don't have that, so this is good enough. So here I'm going to copy paste this part back inside of the register page too, because this is the register page, right? And I'm just going to grab the last two statements here and copy paste that in there too. There we go. So now there's no way to get there if I'm already logged in. Okay, and I'm definitely going to do a return here. Okay, one more thing is let's do some better commenting. Instead of getting, we're not just getting, we're display the login page. That's what we're doing here. We're displaying the register page, right? That's what this does. But we really don't have anything to do with processing, which is what I want to focus on today. Let's start with logging in. Okay, so I'm going to grab this piece, copy it, and go in here, and let's do a post request for what we're going to do. We're not going to show anything, so let's get rid of everything that's inside here for now. And we're going to do something like it's going to be, we're going to process the login request. That's what we're really doing. So that is a kind of a blank thing we're going to fill in. Let's do the same thing for our register page. I'm going to grab this, copy it, go down here, paste it, and let's do another paste as well, because we'll also do our logout. So register here, we're going to process the register request. There is no displaying, so we're going to get rid of all the stuff inside here, making sure that we don't delete anything we need. And then finally, we're going to process the logout request. Process the logout request, okay? And that would be a different route as well. It would be logout. And we don't need any of this stuff. Okay, so those are the three things I want to focus on. I want to do, this should be a post. All right, this is a post, but for the logout, it's a get because I'm not actually submitting a form. The posts are really great when I'm submitting a form because that form method is going to generate that. But if I'm just clicking on a link, then it has to be a GET request by default, unless I specify otherwise. All right, so that is, because logout is a link, and this is a process request from the form, from the register page. This is a process request from the form for the login page. Nice. Okay, let's start with the login. And how do I do that process request now? Well, I need access to the passport in order for me to do that. I don't have passport installed in my router. Let's go up and do that. So up at the top, I'm going to say, let's import it. I'm going to say import passport from passport. Okay. And then once I've done that, that's just like importing anything else. I'm going to scroll down all the way to this login area, and I'm going to start using it. I'm going to say, hey, passport, I want to authenticate, and I want to use the local strategy to authenticate. Okay. I'm going to use a callback function, which includes an error callback, some kind of user information and some information, and other information. And we're going to, at the end, and this is interesting, I'm going to send in the information I need by it. This function, authenticate, is going to be a self-calling function where I'm going to pass in the request, response, and next object. And that is new. We haven't seen this kind of format before, right? So what's happening is I'm taking the request, response, and next object from the post request, and I'm passing that information into the authenticate method. That's what's happening here. Inside the authenticate method, I'm going to say there's a bunch of ways this can fail, right? One of them is, are there server errors, right? If there are, we're going to say then that we're going to do a console.error, just like we've done before, and we're going to do a response end. Okay, that's going to stop our server from running. We want that. How about the other one? What if, are there actual login errors? Like, for example, I don't know, incorrect login. If there are, if there's no user that's returned, and the user object, just to specify, is going to give you either true or false or the user information. Okay. So you're going to say if there's no user, then we want to use that request flash. Remember that request flash object? It's connect flash. I'm going to configure the login message. This is the error message for the login page. and it's going to have key value pairs. The key is login message. You can make this whatever you want. And then the value is authentication error. That is what you're going to pump out to that page inside of the message area. Okay, cool. And I also want to return, here's something I want to do. I'm going to return from this function. I'm going to say, let's res redirect to the /login page again, because you know what? You didn't enter the right information. Okay, barring this, if I do have the correct information, then I want to perform the login, request.login, and I'm going to add in the user object that I'm getting. I'm going to pass in a function that has an error, okay, condition, and this error is different than the other ones where, and by the way, it's formed up the exact same way, but it's a different type of error. All right, it's a different type of error. What this is checking is if the login request is successful, what do we do if it's successful? Well, we're going to take that error and are there errors in the database? Are there database errors? If there's database errors, then we want things to stop. We don't want things to continue. Otherwise, if all is good, we got to this point, then we want to res.redirect back to /contact list because we've correctly logged in. That is my Passport Authenticate in its entirety right there. So if you need to, take a snapshot, and that is what we're putting in. Questions around this? That's my login process. It's not that difficult, but I want to mention again what's happening here. We're responding to a post request. The post request is coming from the form from the login page. Remember, we changed the method to post, right? Then what's happening is as soon as I do that post request, we're going to get a username and password. That's going to be inside of the request.body, right? Rec body. The rec body is going to be transferred in here as parameters inside of my authenticate function. The request body is going to have a username, that username information. And what's going to happen is the user object is going to be populated if I've successfully completed the request login, right? That's what's going to go back up there. Remember, this is an asynchronous function, right? I want to mention this again. That runs, and it's kind of like a listener, right? As soon as I log in, it checks to see if I've logged in properly, and if I have, it's going to redirect. If I haven't, it's going to pump out a message. Okay, it's a little bit different than what we've seen. So that is the login process. Next, let's do the register. So the register page is actually a little bit different than the login page. We start off and we say, hey, if...
typing the logout request.
Thank you.
No problem.
Actually, let's just do that. Let's do the logout. Let's see what logout looks like. Logout is super simple, like super, super simple. It's just a request, I'm not joking around, .logout, all right? I mean, it's that simple. Woo! Logout's done. And we're going to do response.redirect back to the login page, since we're here. Thank you for that. So I'm just trying to take advantage of where I'm typing. Awesome. So that's really the logout. The logout is like the simplest thing ever, okay? What about register? Register is always more difficult than anything else. And how does this look? Okay, so yeah. It starts like this. I want to instantiate, let's try this, instantiate a new user object. Okay, I can't do this because I don't have access to the user model. I need to include it here inside of my file. Let's go up to the top again, and just like we've imported the contact model, let's import the user model. Okay, same as we did before. Now I have access to the user model. Going back down to where I was, right? And which is down in here. I want to instantiate that object. I'm going to go and do that now. I'm going to say let new user equals to a new user object where I must configure a lowercase username. I'm going to talk about this in a second, which is request.body.username, all lowercase, and a uppercase email address. And you're going to go, what? Why is that like that, Tom? I'll talk about that too. And email address is lowercase. That's coming from the form. And then a capitalized, again, display name with request.body.displayName. Oh, actually, there is no display name on the form. It's first name. We'll make it plus a space plus a last name because we're getting that information from the form. And it has to be request.body.lastName. That's where it's coming from, the form object, right? And that's how we're going to make up the display name. Let me take a pause here to talk about this phenomenon. Why lowercase username and why uppercase everything else? Well, let's recall our model that we put together last time. In our model, what we said was, let's just double click on this. What we said was that we should have an uppercase username. And well, we could, but there's a problem with this. And let me explain that by going to the documentation. So if I go back up to the documentation and I want to try and find passport local mongoose, I want to find passport local mongoose. I don't think this is the right one. Oh, it is. If I scroll down, this is the passport local mongoose documentation. I'll copy that in again for you so you can follow along here because I want you to understand what's happening, why I have to change this. And if I scroll down, it talks about how we can use this simple configuration, which is what we did. We did this exact same thing in our app.ts file. And slowly, if I scroll down even more, then you can see that when I use a user plugin with Passport Local Mongoose, there's this thing called options. We're not using options, and options are key. We don't have to if you accept the defaults. But guess what? The default username is a lowercase u username. If I want to make use of this username, which we can, then I have to go down and change the username field so that it does not default to username. Look at that. It says default to lowercase username. Okay. So example, if I wanted to use the email address as my username or something else, student ID or whatever you want. Okay. Interesting. So yeah. So what I could do that, and the way that would look is something like that looks like this. I would say, let's make an object, and that would be the username field. So username field, and the username field would be something like capital U username, because that is what we decided to do. That would have to be my option. Okay. By the way, I'm showing you this. You can type it, but we're going to get rid of it in a second, and I'll talk about why. Okay. Because, so this is the username field option. There's a lot of different options here that you can turn on. You can also turn on things like the attempts field. How many attempts do I have? As an example, I can also specify the salt field. I can put in my own salt value if I want to, and my hash field, right, and so on. I can also limit the number of attempts. I can have a maximum number of attempts. I can unlock. I can have an unlock interval in milliseconds, and a bunch of other ways of stopping you from logging in, which are very interesting, but we're not going to use them. But the problem with this is this idea of using the username field is, well, it works, but I have to change the username field on my forms. So both my login and register form and everywhere else. And you know what? I'm not going to do that. So I'm just going to remove this option. That would be the way to change it. And I'm going to go here and just, I know it's breaking convention, but I'm going to make this a lowercase u. Sorry, I'm doing it. Sometimes it just makes sense. And you might look at this and go, but why? Well, now we know why. Okay, because the default is username lowercase. If I made it uppercase username, I'd have to make it everywhere else. And we're going to time out if I do that. There's lots of places, not just one place. And it's not going to help us in any way, believe it or not. Okay, notice here, there's like a ton of places I've used it. So we're going to leave it the way it is for now. Save.
We have to change the declare global export to.
No, leave this alone.
Leave it? Okay.
Because that's a good question. Yeah, maybe we should change it. Yeah, do it. Do it. Do it. Change it. It's all for you, Jacob. All right, let's do it. So, so now that we've changed that and we're good to go. Sorry, I was just thinking about should we? And yeah, we should. And going back now, after we fixed that model problem, if we go back here, that's why we need to do this. We have no choice but to do this because if we don't, we're going to have issues. And everywhere inside of our files, inside of our, like I said, in our content, which is in my login page, you can see that here we're using a lowercase u username. And the same thing goes with my register page. We're, kind of a lowercase u username. And it's just better. Leave it for now. Maybe forever. All right, so wonderful. We've made a new username. I explained why, so you don't complain. You're like, that's ugly, Tom. It is. It's ugly. I admit it, right? But we're doing it for a reason, and I want to do it because I also want you to understand why it's happening. So you're like, why did Tom? We're just following along. We don't know why it's why we're coding anything. We're just doing what Tom says. Don't do that. Ask questions. Comment if I make a mistake. Like you've done, and this is good. Next, once we do that, I want to do the user registration. So I'm going to say, hey, user, I want to now register. See that comes up. And I want to register with my new user. And I want to pass in the request.body.password. That's interesting. Remember, I never keep track of my password ever. I don't do that. And the reason why I don't keep track of my password, just like if you call IT, and you go, hey, IT, can I get my password? They'll be like, nope, don't know what your password is. And you'll see why in a second. Okay? So you pass in the password. It's not clear text. It gets hashed and salted, right? Which means it gets encrypted. And then after it gets encrypted, we want to do slightly different error handling here. We're going to say if error, then what kind of error am I getting? Well, I could get my error name. I could have an error that is the user exists error, right? That is a possibility. And if the user exists error, I could put out a custom message, but I don't want that. I mean, sure, I want to know for me and for you. So let's output that to the console. We'll do a console.error that says something like user already exists. User, we can say error user already exists. And this is for us. It's going to go on our console, right? So we know why the user is experiencing an error, okay? And that's the error that we're going to have. We're also going to do a request.flash where we're going to set up a message, right? That's going to say, we're going to make a new message called a register message. And we can specify that there's a registration error. We don't know what it is. I'm not going to tell you what it is, but it's an error in registration. Okay, if it's a user exist error. However, it could be some other kind of error, and there are many types, but this is the most common problem, user exist error. It could be like the username is too small. It could be that a bunch of stuff, but this is the one I'm just showing you how to capture that. You can also do a switch case in here where you're switching on error name, and you can have different kinds of errors that you're switching for. You can do a try catch in here. You can do a lot of different things. The next one is, what about if it's another type of error? And it's more like, I want to know what that is if it's an error. Like it's most likely some kind of other error. Like, for example, some kind of server error, the database is dead, something. I don't know what it is, but it's impossible for me not to be able to register. I want to know what that is. And I want to do a request flash here as well. Let's copy paste this. Request flash. but the request flash is going to be like server error because we don't know what it is, right? And I want to show this to the user because I want them to call me and tell me, Tom, I got a server error on when a user was registering. I got a server error. Okay, I'm going to deal with it right away. Like what the heck is going on? Maybe we were disconnected from the server. Maybe the server has died somehow. Maybe. Too many maybes. And I want to do a request redirect, return a res redirect, sorry, to / register. So I want to take me back to the register page. That's what the register thing does. And that's if I have an error. But what if there's no error? Well, then what I want to do for now, maybe forever, is automatically log in the user so they don't have to go back to the user page. Now, the right thing to do in a real world environment might be just to take them back to the login page, send another request flash, which is a positive one, saying, registration successful, please log in. That is something you can do as well as an alternate. Okay, here I'm just going to log you in automatically, and it's going to look like this. Return passport.authentication, authenticate, and I'm going to do the local authentication again, where I'm going to pass in a request response and an object, an empty function that's going to basically say return res.redirect back to contact list. So this is like automatically log the user in and put them in there. Again, it's a tactic. I'm not telling you it's the best tactic. The secure way to do this would be, if I was going to do in here instead as an alternate, I would say request flash, register message, registration successful, please log in, and then return res.redirect back to /login. So that way they can test their login, log back in with the user you just registered. Okay. The other way to do that here would be to confirm, log them in with limited, role accessibility. So in other words, their authorization would be minimal. They're kind of like locked into their basic functionality until they validate their email address, as an example, some information. So you can have another middleware function that triggers here that takes them to a validation script or sends them a validation message to their email address and say, please validate your profile. And then if they don't validate after a certain amount of time, then you delete their profile from the system. Okay, that's how we normally do it. All right, and that is your register function. Okay, so please take a screenshot of that if you need to, but that is the big function right there. So it's not that difficult. It's just there's different piece parts to it. There's a lot of moving pieces in this thing. That's why it makes, writing the server a little challenging. But things to know, like if you're going to do this by yourself, how would you do it? Well, I'm giving you the pieces to do it. I'm telling you need a user. It makes sense that you need to create a user object and to use that new user object to register, because you're going to save this to the database. That's what user.register does. Okay. Okay, let's take a look at this. Let's actually do the registration and login process. In order for me to prepare for this, I'm going to go to Mongo locally. Just going to type in Mongo, and I'm going to go to show DBS. You're going to see that I have my contacts. I'm going to use contacts. That's the contacts database. And I'm going to show collections. Notice that I already have a users collection because I've been doing this all day. I'm going to go to db.users.drop. I'm going to drop that collection. So you and I are going to make a new one. Okay. Let's do that now. So I'm going to go back out to my page. And I'm going to register. Let's refresh the page, please. And I'm going to register my admin user. The way I would do that is I would type in admin. And I would skip the last name and go admin@example.com. Username would be lowercase admin 123456, and we're not validating right now, but I'm going to do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 here as well. And then click this register button. And if everything works well, then we're going to be redirected to this page. And this is what you should have too. What did we do? Well, let's take a look at our database. So if I go to the database and I say db.users.find.pretty now, you're going to see a wonderful hash of my 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Take a look. Wow, that's going to be mighty hard to crack, right? If I didn't know. That's why when you call IT and you go like, IT, can you please log me in with my password? They're going to be like, yeah, no, we don't know. For most times they do that. Although sometimes I call DC IT and they go, yeah, we know your password. Here it is. I'm like, how do you know that? You shouldn't know my password, right? But they know. I guess it's because we're an institution. But for the most part, you know, this is how it would work. Okay. So that is the thing. What are your thoughts on this one? Pretty crazy, is my thoughts, right?
My thought immediately went to, I wish I could memorize that whole string and then create a password with that.
That many?
And then see what that would be when it's salted and hashed.
It's crazy. Salted, hashed, and you can also do salt and pepper. You know that, right? You can do salt, and then you can add pepper at the end too. Salt is the prefix, and pepper is a postfix. You can do that. Yeah, there's ways of doing that more secure than this, right? There are ways. Yeah, there are ways of decrypting this. As soon as I have the salt, as an example, then if I know the algorithm that I'm using to hash, I could decrypt it, and that's what we're doing on the back end. So that's why, although it's clear text for us, up online, I mean, the only person that would have access to it is the database administrator. It's not clear text, and they need to know the method, and that's why a lot of times they recommend putting it through a double process. So have a salt and hash, and then the salt is actually hidden. You don't have to even put it here. And there's ways of doing that in a more secure scenario where you have you don't call it hash, you call it password. And then password is completely different. It's like hash twice, right? Which you can do. Okay, or 3 times or 4 times, multiple hash, which is what they do. Now this is already being done because the process that we're using is kind of a S-crypt or B-crypt equivalent, I think, on the back end, which is pretty good. And like I said to you before, if you look at the Passport Local Mongoose, you can set up some salt. So you can say right now this specifies the salt length in bytes. The default is 32. You can specify a longer byte length, like 256 bytes, much longer. Key length specifies the length in byte of the generated key. That's your, you know, the key that we're using. So the salt, as a good example, is the thing that we're using. And that's kind of the hash. Salt field and hash field, you can specify what those are, like we said. And there's other things you can do with this little very simple thing. So from an authentication perspective, I'm not going to tell you it's super secure or anything like that, but it's not terribly bad. Encoding specifies the encoding the generated salt and hash will be stored in. The default is to hex, and you can change the encoding type if you want. Okay. So again, this is really neat. There's a lot of little options that you can go through and change. You can also add error messages where you can specify error messages that come back out. Again, I don't recommend these error messages be something you give the user. There's most likely is what you want to do is use it for us. And Passport Local Mongoose uses the PBK DF2 algorithm, which is the Node crypto library. So take a look at what that is. If you actually click there, PBK DF2, right? And you can kind of look and see what they recommend. Do they think it's a good you know, hashing algorithm, and do they agree with it? And again, a lot of this is they're talking about how it might not be as you know, as good as S-crypt. So B-crypt is what's happening right now, is what we're using right now. Okay, equivalent. All right, so that is Passport Local Mongoose, and that's what generated this. So we know we successfully registered our user, admin. Let's log in now. So I'm going to go back and try it again and go back up to this. And let's log out. We don't have a log out thing yet because we don't have a display name. We're going to fix that in a second. But let's go here and log out. And when we log out, it takes us here. And let's log in. So I'm going to say admin. And let's try a wrong password, right? And click login. You can see that, oh man, what the heck? Well, the reason why this happened is because we still have front-end technologies triggering. Let's fix this problem. But before we go there, let's add in, just do a push. We'll say git add dot, git commit -m, and we'll say added support routing for login, register, and logout functions. Git push. So we've done this part. All right, let's fix this problem. So the problem we're having, the reason why it redirected us is because of our client-side stuff. So if I go to client, and if I go to scripts, and if I go to app.ts, and if I zoom all the way down to the bottom, you can see that it goes to a couple things happen. Check login. We don't want to do this check login function anymore, so let's remove it. No more check login. And then the next part is, if we scroll down, we have our login, and it says display login and display register. Let's right-click here and go to definition. And it's going to take us to the display login page function inside of our app.ts. Guys, kill it. Everything except for the first line, which is a console log. So it should look like this now. Why? Because we're not saving anything inside of our we're not even checking anything with session storage, nothing with anything else. So this is nothing we need to do here. But however, in the display register page, again, a future to do, maybe if you have this, would be to implement some validation, data or data entry validation. And the reason for this to do is because if we don't do this, right, then we might have very short usernames, very short password length, and all that kind of stuff. We want a password that's around 12 characters nowadays. We don't have this. I'm not going to enforce it, and it's kind of out of scope right now, but this is something that's missing that we may want to implement later if we have time. Okay, so registration should definitely force validation. There's two ways to do it. You can do it on the back end, and you can do it on the front end, and you can also do it both times, the front and the back, just in case the front end gets turned off, which you can do if you're careful. All right, so for now, we're not going to do anything, but we put a to-do in there because we're going to specify, hey, maybe we want to come back here and fix this problem later. Save. And now if I go back and refresh the page, I must refresh the page. And if I type admin and just press enter, it's going to go wham. And we should get an error up here too, right? An error. So how come we're not getting the error? Well, because we haven't enabled those errors yet in the routing. Let's go back and fix that problem. So again, in the index.ts, we have our both the login and register messages, but we're not using messaging right now. And the way to use it would be inside for login, we would change our messages stub. This is kind of our temporary placeholder. We would change this to request.flash and the name of the key that we're using, which is the login message. That's what's going to go in there. So it's going to read from the flash, the connect flash. Okay, so you can read or write. Writing looks like this, key value pairs. Reading looks like this, only the key. So we're going to do the same thing, this request flash. We're going to do the same thing in the register page. So go back to the register page. Okay, and in the register page, in the messages, we're going to put that in there, and we're going to change this to register message. Save. Do that and go back, and then if I refresh the page and press login, it's going to say authentication error. That's what we want to see. If I put admin and kind of press login, authentication error. If I want to admin and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, then it's going to log me in. And if then the next problem is I can't log out. If I click login, by the way, it's going to just take me back here because we've made it so you can't go to login or even register. If I type in register here, you can't go there because it'll just bounce us back to here because we're already logged in. But we can log out. Okay, here's our logout. And we want to give that link a chance to work. And the way to do that is to create our little function. But first, let's fix our problem. We just fixed another problem. So we're going to say git commit -m. We'll say we enabled flash messages. Git push. Fix that problem.
I'm having a little issue where it's just not writing the authentication error in my login message. And I press it and I just get a red box with nothing in it.
That's unusual.
Yeah. Like, so I know that the flash messaging is happening, it's just not sending it.
Okay. The things to check are if it's not sending, there's two possibilities. First thing I would check in my mind, I'm just trying to, just by what you're telling me, is I would start looking at the form. Let's look at the registration form or the login form. Which one are you having a problem with?
Login.
Let's look at the login form again and make sure that it looks like this. Okay, that messages are being injected here. Are you injecting messages?
Oh, I got the equal sign.
Yeah, that's the first thing I would check. See how I knew? Because when I'm hearing, well, your message shows up, that means there is a message length. That's why it's showing up. There must be a message length. If there's a message length, then somehow the message isn't getting into this part right here, right? And you said it was red, which means this class is okay. It's showing up, but there's no message, and that's why. Try that now. Yeah.
Nothing else.
Right?
Yep, we're good to go.
So going back to this now, we have everything, but we can't log out, and that takes a little bit more work. And let me explain what has to happen. So far, what we have in our register or our routing is display name is a stub, right? What we want for display name is to show our user. So display name is if there's a user, if request.user exists, then I want to show my display name. If request.user doesn't show up, then I want my display name to be blank. So I could do a ternary operator here, and I can say if, as an example, request.user exists, then we can put, kind of put in the request.displayname, right, which is what I want, or the user.displayname in here. So I can say the user.displayname. I could put that in there, right? And or if we don't have that, then do this. That is definitely a way of doing it. But, this is pretty ugly, and the user is going to complain that says, I don't know what user is. And what if I put it as request display name? Well, request, it doesn't know what display name is, and it's going to give you this because of TypeScript. It doesn't understand how to add this in. We need to make another little function to do just this. So functions, where the heck do you put them so that they're good, not just here, but in multiple files? It has to be a centralized location, and I'm going to create one in a folder called util. So I'm going to go into the server folder right here on the left, make a brand new folder in there called util. That's my utility folder for my utility or convenience functions. I'm going to add a new file in there called index.ts. My index.ts file is where my utility is going to be stored. I want to import Express is what I want, right? But I want a few things from Express that I want to use. And what I want to do here with this thing, when I go to my import, there's some messaging I can do. I want to import Express. And normally I would say from Express, right? Because that's where I want to import them from. But I also want to specify what I would like to import. I want to import the request object. You can see that I can search that up now. The response object and the next function. I want to have those things imported for sure. So I can have access to those things here inside of my little file that I'm going to use for my convenience functions. Okay. Next, once I have this little file, I want to have two functions that I want to export. And I'm going to do them individually. I'm going to export a function, right, called user display name, right, where it's going to take in a request object, which is of type request, and it's going to spit out a string. Okay, that's the first one. The other function which I really want to kind of put together is one that you're very familiar with. It's called authguard. That's where I'm going to do my authguard function here too. And I'm going to have a request. So here's a request, a response. Here's the response type, and a next function, which there's the next function. And it's going to return void. Let's do the authguard function first before we do this one. Authguard is super easy. It looks like this. If not request dot is authenticated. If I'm not authenticated, this is a beautiful thing. Look at this. If I'm not authenticated, then return res dot redirect to where? /login. Beautiful. Otherwise, go to the next function. What this is, I'm writing my own middleware. So custom authentication guard middleware, which is what we just wrote. That is my authguard function. Okay, I'm going to tell you how to use it in a sec. First, let's go into this part and figure this out. I'm going to say if request.user, if my user exists, right, then let my user equal to my request.user, and we're going to cast it as a user document. Wait, what? Where did this user document come from? It came from, remember that custom type we put in the model, the global declaration we made with the username lowercase? Thank you, Jacob. That is what we did there. We went into our models, and I went into my user model, and at the bottom here I had a global declaration. I said that the user document extends the Mongoose document and adds these things. Okay, so let's go back. If I go back to my util index.ts, that's the first part. The next part is I want to return my user.displayname, right? And I want to cast it to a string, just to make sure that TypeScript doesn't complain. And then otherwise, if request user doesn't exist, then I want to return nothing. So this little function is, again, it's a little function. It's not middleware because there's no next function. The next function makes this middleware because it allows me to inject this function wherever I want. It'll first do this function, and then if this passes, if this check passes, it'll go to the next function, even if it's my a callback function. So I can put this between a callback function and the route, which I'm going to show you in a second. So this is just a custom convenience function. Just a little, come on, convenience function to return the display name of the user. That's what it does. Okay. How do I use this and how do I use this? Well, I need to import my index from the util folder. And I'm going to go back into my routes, right? Let's go back into my routes and into my index route. And at the top, I'm going to say, let's import that. I'm going to say that import, and I can specify what I want. For example, authguard, right? I can import authguard from ... util/index.ts, right? And since I have authguard here, I can also, I know that that's the one. I can go control space and it'll find me user display name, which is what I want to have too. So I don't even have to have a name. I just can export the function, and then I can use the function as if it was written in here. Again, another way of using the import from module pattern, so I can inject functions as if they were native, but they're not. Okay, cool. So now, how do I use my user display name? Well, I would go here and I would say user display name, and then pass in the request object. I need the request object from the link, the path, because the request object is going to tell me if the user is here. Okay, so I want to grab this right here, this example. I'm going to go Control F, which is going to take me to this for display name. I found 10 iterations of this. And then I'm going to take this part right here and I'm going to replace that with this. Okay, and replace all, please. And what that's going to do, if you did it carefully enough, if not, please undo, is going to inject display name everywhere instead of me copy pasting. And I want to, where it's really long like this one, I'm just going to put it on the next line so you can see everything. Okay, so I'm just going to scroll down and check it. I always try and check it anyway, even if I did a copy replacement, just to make sure that things are okay. Okay, so if anything that's long like this, I'm just going to put it on the next line, just so I can see both. Okay, it looks like it's pretty good. It did what I asked it to do. Wonderful. So now that I have this in here, and I'm using user display name, let's test it. So Dave, go back out to here and refresh. I want to log in. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, press enter, and yay, we're good. And guess what? It says that I have a logout, right? And if I press logout, I'm logged out. Nice. So that's how it works. So did it work for you? Check mark if you're with me on that one. Hey, good. So you should really like that. That is something that when I was first learning Node and I built my own little middleware, that's my middleware, by the way, that I wrote. When I first did, thank you for that feedback. When I first wrote that, I was like, oh my God, it's so easy. Now I get it. Right? I was like, this is totally easy. I can make whatever thing I want, anywhere I want, and inject it, and I can use it, and it's beautiful, right? Because that's what this does. That's what the import statement does. Import connects files together, and it creates a dependency, a link between, where I have my data and somewhere else without using some kind of indexed HTML like we did before. Wonderful. Now that I've got that, I want to protect my pages. But first, let's put this up on GitHub because we got that done. So git add dot, git commit -m, and I'll say added utility functions for authguard and display name. Okay, nice. And what I want to do now is I want to protect I want to secure the routes that I don't want users to go to unless they're logged in. Because right now, if I go back up here and if I go to contact us and go to show contact list, whether I'm logged in or not, I'm going to see my data. I don't want this. I want for me to click this button, and if I'm not logged in, well, two things. I don't even want to show this button unless I'm logged in. And if I click this button and I'm not logged in, it should take me to the login button. All right, so let's do this. How do I use my authguard now? Super simple, guys, the way I've written it. You're going to go down to your routes that are for your contact list, and anywhere right next to the root, right on the same line as the get, you're going to put authguard, like this. That's it. That root is protected now. And you're going to do the same thing for all of them. So my add root, authguard, right? For my add post, so I'm posting, if I'm displaying or processing, authguard, right? If I'm going to edit, authguard. I'm showing my display my edit page. If I'm processing the edit page, authguard. The whole thing. I can do individual ones like this, or if I really want to, I can go to the actual root. If we had a separate root page, which I will, we can protect the entire section. For now, no. I'm going to go down to the last one, which is delete and authguard. So I can't delete, I can't add, I can't edit, I can't even list anything unless I'm logged in. That's what protection does. And all I have to do is include authguard in this entire area. Okay? Save. Test it. Refresh. Show contact list, and no way. You're not going to get to my contact list anymore. Even if I go here and type it in, or if I try and do an add or an edit, if I knew it, it would just not allow it. It would just redirect me. Let's log in, though. Hey, look at that. And I can still edit and do all the stuff I can do. So again, security is there. I want to mention something before we move on, which is, where is this security being held? Well, if you look here under cookies, you can see that it uses cookie-based authentication. So session storage is nothing. Local storage is nothing, but it does use cookie-based authentication. So this is the cookie from my security ID. That's what this is. Connect. This is a connect session. That's the connect session ID, with where it takes the session secret. That's why it's important to get that session secret and put it inside of some kind of environment variable. We're going to do that later, right? And what it does is basically stores a hash right here inside. We can actually click on this thing to see it. That's the actual hash value of my username. Okay, we don't even know what this is, but we know a user exists, and it's being stored right here. If I delete this, delete, and if I refresh the page, it will log me out. I'm logged out. Notice that it also printed this out here as well. This connect session ID basically says we have a session ID, but it's basically when I refresh the page, it did a round trip and checked to see if I had one in here, which means I was logged out, and it stored something else in here, because what we told it to do in our app.ts in the config is down in here we said, hey, save uninitialized false, resave false. So what it did was it pumped out that session ID, and it basically says that that session ID tells connect the express session. It tells it that we're logged out. That's what that is. Okay, so that's how it does security. It's cookie-based authentication. Cookie-based authentication is not as secure as token-based authentication. We can create a bearer token, is what we're going to talk about later on. And I'm going to do that with you guys next week. That's the subject of JWT, which is JSON Web Tokens. So token-based authentication as opposed to cookie-based authentication. Cookie-based authentication only works in the browser, where token-based authentication works between the server and something else. For example, the server, the back end as a server, which is Express, and let's say a front end like React, right? Or something else, or Angular, or something else, right? You can't use cookie-based authentication to work properly with a front end where you want to secure the back end, okay? If you want to secure the back end and you don't want to show data, you have to use token-based authentication, which we'll talk about next week. All right, so that is this part. Let's try again and log in to make sure that I didn't kill anything. You can see that, sure enough, here we are. We're logged in again. I'm not saving anything, right? And this is great, but let's put this up on GitHub again, because we just made another change. So again, I'm going to go here and I'm going to say git add dot git commit -m, and we'll say secured contact list pages with authguard. Okay, nice. So that is your secure areas. By the way, just right then, what we just covered covers, I would say, most of the things you need to do for assignment 4, which is your lab 4. Okay. Most of the things we need to do for authentication, the secure area, all that stuff is right here. I've just given it to you. All right, let's put this up on our database. So what I want to do for that is I want to switch our configuration in our app.ts. Let's do that. And I want to switch it from a local URI, which is what we had for our connecting, to a remote URI. That means I'm connecting back to MongoDB Atlas. I'm also going to change my DB configuration to show MongoDB Atlas to me as a user. So I know that I'm connected to MongoDB Atlas. That's what this is for. So I'm going to save that, and I'm going to save this. And when I go back out to my my node, you can see now I'm connected to MongoDB Atlas. Okay. Question: if I tried to log in here with my admin user, should I be able to log in?
No, because
Online on Atlas, right? Here locally, we're good. But if I try to do this now, well, that's wrong anyway. But if I try to do admin and then try and put in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, it's going to go bam. No, let's register for the first time. So I'm going to go here and register again. Let's do this, please, with me. I'm going to say admin and admin at example.com. And then the username is admin 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Please type that carefully. And then click register. And then what it's going to do is it's going to take me out here and wow, look at this. Some people have done some other stuff up here as well. Wow. Let's delete that. We can do some delete operations. That works okay, right? And I have some additional data up here, which is pretty cool. Nice. Let's prove that I'm doing this online. Well, we just saw that, but if I go to MongoDB Atlas and log in, let's go there. So I want to log in. And if I do that, then what you're going to see is I can select our account. If I go to select our account, which is section 1, that's you guys. Then what I want to do is I want to go to Browse Collections. And if you look at Browse Collections on the left, you'll see a user's collection. And hey, there's our hash. There's that admin user that we just added in just now. Okay. Wonderful. That's great. And that's what we want to do. We've already kind of put this up on our MongoDB Atlas. That means we're one step away from using our Heroku. All right, let's do the Heroku thing now. So we have a couple things to change, right? Because we switched to the remote URI. So I'm going to go here and I'm going to say git add dot git commit -m, and we'll say switched to MongoDB Atlas, and then git push. That pushes everything, all my changes, so we're good to go. And just to be clear, I want to do a couple things. Let's get out of Mongo. So we'll do a quit. And we'll also quit out of the server. So Control-C to make sure that you see that the server's not running anymore. Nice. I don't have to transpile anymore, so I can do that. This is gone, and I can stop my node altogether because I don't need to do this anymore either. So we can stop all this. So now I've stopped out of this, and I can. I want to grab my files from up online, and I want to go to where I have my Heroku live site like we did before. Please do this with me. This is going to complete your in-class exercise 12. And I'm going to go into section 1. I'm going to go into ICE 12. And I'm going to grab everything except for node modules, please. Copy it. And I'm going to go back into Heroku live site and get rid of everything. And then paste my changes. There it is. There's paste those changes. And I want to do Heroku live site by dragging and dropping it into Visual Studio Code. I don't have my node modules, so just keep that in mind. I'm going to clear that up and actually run PowerShell because that's the kind of guy that I am. I don't like command prompt if I don't have to. I'm going to do a yarn install because I didn't copy across my node modules. I wanted it to be done for me here, and it's the right thing for me to do. And I don't need to transpile or anything else. There's nothing I need to do here. I'm just going to go git add dot, git commit -m, and I'll say added ICE 12 to Heroku. And git push. If it gives you a problem, if it says, no, I can't do that because there's stuff that you haven't pulled down, you can do a git push -- force, which will force your commit to go up. Okay. Now let's check to see if it's gone. So I'm going to go back up to here, and I'm going to go to Heroku. And on Heroku, I'm going to search for your version. So it's WEBD6201, and it's winter 2022, and you guys are section 1. And let's see what's happening with our activity. Activity says just now the build succeeded. Look, that's how fast it was. And I can open up my app, and if everything goes well, I should be able to go to my contact page. And if I go to show contact list, it's going to go wham. Nope. If I log in and I click login, then it's going to take me, if everything goes well, to my data. Okay.
Uh-oh, I got a build error of reaching my concurrent build limit.
Okay. I don't have that.
Keep spamming. Just keep spamming.
Yep.
And then eventually it works.
Which button do you keep spamming?
Deploy, like deploy branch. Wherever it says main, then deploy branch. Just keep going, keep going, and keep going until eventually it goes, hey.
I got you. Yeah. All right, so then I can log out, and that, my friends, is the end of our in-class exercise demo for today. Any questions around what we did, the process, and everything else? We did a lot of work this week, honestly. Every week is a lot of work, but this week specifically, we've added in most of the things you need for your Lab 4. Let me just go through that one more time, because just to not to let you go yet. One sec, and let me talk about that in a second. So let's go into courses and see what you're missing now. So yeah, let's go into this. So Lab 4. And again, you know what? I'm going through this with you because I want to make sure you understand the requirements. So it says, let's see if you guys know what to do now. So working alone or with a partner, you will create a fictitious portfolio website using Express. Yay! And the implementing the EJS templating engine. Check. You're going to be live on a cloud service such as Microsoft Azure, Heroku, or DigitalOcean. Check. Heroku. As an option, if you're working alone, you may use this assignment as a chance to craft your own personal portfolio website. That's optional, whatever you want to do. Your site will also include a secure area that displays a list of business contacts. User will have to provide a username and password to access this area. Check. The contact list and your authentication credentials will exist in a MongoDB database. Check. You will be able to perform full CRUD for your contact list, so you'll need to create all required views. Check. That sounds like we're done, right? And if I scroll down here, just as an example, it talks about the navigation bar. There are some minor things. Your custom logo, like this is content that you've got to supply. That's not me, right? That's you to supply your custom logo and About Me page and blah, blah, blah. That's all you. Okay, and then when I come down to your server site structure, it says generate your site using the Express generator. You want to use the EJS templating engine. All your JavaScript, CSS, and multimedia asset files are in one place in some kind of public folder. Your public folder is called client. Check, right? MongoDB database server, Mongoose, and Passport. You've installed that. MongoDB as a database. I talked about how to sign up for Atlas. You do CRUD operations. This is all done. You made a user schema, which is what you did, as well as a schema for your contact list, a contact schema, which is up here. You've got the contact schema and a user schema. Check, check. And you've installed Passport, the NPM package. You've done that. And you've got an authguard method, which we have, to protect secure pages from being accessed by unauthorized or unauthenticated users. Check. All this is pretty much done. Server-side routing and content views, you got all this because we have views partials folder. Our views partials folder are the content and components folder. You've done that. Check. You use router.get and router.post to res render those views. In the login and register views, you've done this part, which is basically logging in and registering. This is all correct. We've done this part. And secure area contact list view, we did this with AuthGuard, right? We added all this stuff. And a secure area update view, we did that. The update and edit form are the same form. And then that's it. Guys, you're done. Really, all you have to do now is just put together your content. So really, at the end of the day, you can complete your assignment, your lab 4 now, if you have it. We have all the stuff. I recommend at this point in time, you use our in-class exercise 12 to complete your lab 4. You don't have to do anything else other than this. There's no JWT required. Okay? Questions around this, please. And I'm showing you this because I know people have asked, like, what in-class exercise do I use as a base? This one, in-class exercise 12. You're ready to go. Okay, you've got everything you need for your last lab. All right, so we've done this part. The test again is due Saturday. The in-class exercise is due Saturday. And next week, like I said, we're going to have a very short week because we only have one day. Wednesday, please make sure you attend, as I will be talking about authentication with JW2. And I'm also going to restructure the stuff we didn't do. And that's the stuff that we're missing. So we're missing a couple of additional steps. Here are the steps we're missing for next week. I'm just going to go back into our stuff we did. Stuff that we need to do. Still, we're almost there. And so what's left is we have our server, but we have a config, a models, a routes, but we don't have a controllers folder, right? And the controllers folder is what we want to add, and we want to separate these routes. Right now we only have an index route, and we have a dummy route called users. This dummy route we're going to remove. Okay, we don't need this dummy route. We're going to remove it from the config by app.ts. We're going to remove it from here. And what we're going to do is we're going to separate out 3 different routes. Our index route, which is our top level route, our contact list routes, which is a secure route, and our auth routes, which is only login, register, and log out. That's what we're going to have in there. All right, so it's those routes. And then what we want to do is we want to get the logic out of those routes, because the route and the logic is 1 right now. If I look here, I have my router, which is this part. And then this part in here is the logic. This logic has to be extracted from here and put inside of a controllers folder. Why? That will support the model view controller framework that we've been talking about. You might get a question on the test that says, is Node.js model view controller? The answer should be no, it's not. By default, Node.js is a minimalist framework or minimalist structure that you use. You can create a model view controller pattern, which is what we're doing, right? By splitting up your files and separating your concerns. But by default, Node.js doesn't give you very much. We added Express, which extends Node.js, right? And then we added Passport in Mongoose to connect to a Mongo database and add authentication. That's why we did that, right? But for the most part, it doesn't have everything. So again, like I said, ICE 12 is a good starter for your lab 4. If you wanted to wait till next week, the only advantage is the restructure that we're going to do in the beginning of the week. So worst case scenario, if you really wanted to, you could wait till next week on Wednesday, and then you'd have a restructured site as well. Questions before we go for the day? Lab is due week 14, like the very last week of class, which is like not next week, but the week after.
Last day, 22nd.
Yeah, it's like way out there. Yeah. So you have lots of time to get it done, and this way it'll give you a chance to collect your content and test it out, make sure that it fits with the pages, all that stuff, connect with your partner, make sure that they have also helped you out, that kind of stuff, and that it reflects both. You make it the best you can make it, because this is a nice little portfolio piece. no pun intended, for you to use and talk about, hey, look, I just did a full stack application with Node.js and Express, well, which is pretty impressive, to be honest.
Just looking at the content and stuff, and it's like, some of this stuff I can just go back to lab 1 and see
I was already
formatted
thinking
it and got the thing.
And that's exactly what I expected you to do, right? Lab 1 was the ability for us to start off. Remember, we were just learning JavaScript. And now that we're into our final lab, lab 4, we're circling back and we're going, hey, what about all the stuff that we learned? Yeah, what about all the stuff that we learned, right? So what can we do that's different? Can I enhance those pages? Can I make them better? You have a lot of control. You can still combine front end with back end if you really want to, right? So
I'm just thinking about the Thanos meme where it's like you couldn't live with your failures, and where did it bring you back to me? And it's just like lab 1.
I know it's pretty crazy.
I'm just thinking about it like, if there's anything we've learned, it's like, why type things over again? You can just copy and paste something that already worked.
Oh, there you go. There you go. So so that's the one thing. And the other thing is that you've also done one more thing that you sneaky enough that we've done the entire time, which is our site is responsive, right? Our site is responsive. It can be put on a mobile device, right? So you can actually use this on a mobile device as well. Now, this is one thing that I noticed, which we have to fix, which is this is not working. See how this is not working at this point? Maybe it's working for you, it's not working for me. So that is an issue. So why isn't this working, right? Because there's something that's missing from making this work. And we got to talk about how to make this work. And if you look at Control-Shift-J, well, there's no errors. So why isn't this little hamburger working? Because it was working before. Well, you don't have Bootstrap somehow working, and we have to make sure it does work. So there's, again, little niggly bits that are going to make it so that it's fully responsive and all that stuff. So all these little links should be working in there. And the other thing that we're missing is the display name between the contact us and the login page. That's something we're missing in there too. So most of it is there. We can start off. And again, you're going to have minor updates on Wednesday, but for the most part, that's it. So question before we go?
I've been noticing from like the last 3 days, or the last like 3 weeks, is like, oh, we don't have our active link highlighted anymore.
Nope, that's also missing. So we have to fix that too. And I want you to think about, how would you do that on the back end? How would you make it so without using front end technologies? How would I do that on the back end? You can use front end to do that too. You can actually go through and go, hey, look at these links. And remember, just like we did before, we already had that code, right? So if you actually backstep about 5 or 6 weeks, yeah. So EJS, let's take a look at that header again, right? So the great thing about the header, right? If I go back to the views folder, and if I look at the component header, the component header has access to a couple of things here, right? It has links, link access, and it does display name, but you can pass in other things because in my index.ejs, right? And by the way, this is where the problem is with my, at the bottom here, this stuff right here does not compute from my Bootstrap. It's not giving you an error, but it's not actually doing anything. It's just putting it out there. That's why it's not working, because I'm injecting my page. Remember asynchronous? Okay, so let me go back to that. So if I go back to my my header, I have this part that I'm injecting, right? And this part right here is the toggle part. This is the toggle part that I'm getting the navbar toggle, right? But this button that we're creating is not being targeted anymore somehow, right? So I want you to think of that's one thing that needs to be fixed. And then we are in our index.ejs, we're also getting some information, the page. That page is incoming from our router. If I have access to the page, that means in my header, I know what page we're in. Whatever that page is, right? That's the one that I need to highlight. So I could check, right? Is this the page? Is that the page? Is the other? I mean, that's pretty rough, but I could check through this and I can check each one of these things to see what the page is. And then depending on what the page is, I can highlight the correct one, right? I could do that on the back end. Or if you wanted to, which might be cleaner, you can do it on the front end. Both ways work well. But that is, Jacob, like you said, has to be fixed because it's not working right now. We're not highlighting anything. So this nav link active, there's nothing that's nav link active here. We need to inject the nav link active if the page is live. Okay. Any other questions or comments? That's it, guys. We've kind of gone over time a little bit compared to what I wanted to do, but that's it for me. I'll see you guys next week on the 11th when we do more of our stuff. All right, that's it. Thank you so much, and I'll see you guys again. Is it the 11th? Or no, that would be the 12th. 13th. The 13th. I'll see you guys on the 13th. Yay! Okay. Take care and say hi to everybody that hasn't come on today. Okay. Thank you so much, guys.
See you later, bro.
Bye. Take care. Thank you.
Bye.